In Quezon City, a frail old man named Mang Ramon sat by the edge of a crowded street, his back pressed against the cold concrete wall. The city was alive with noise, jeepneys honking, vendors shouting, children laughing, but none of it seemed to touch him. He sat with his violin across his lap, the wood scratched and worn from years of use, yet it was the only possession he truly valued. Mang Ramon had once lived a very different life. 2 decades earlier, he had worked as a janitor in New York, proud to send money back to his family in the Philippines. On the morning of September 11, 2001, everything changed. He had been near the towers, watching in horror as chaos swallowed the city. That day did not just destroy buildings, it destroyed his dreams. He lost his job, his friends, and the fragile security he had built. Returning home years later, he carried nothing but the violin his late father had given him, a gift that became his only companion through endless nights of loneliness. Now, sitting on the streets of Quezon City, people walked past him without a glance, some covering their noses at the sight of his tattered clothes. But when he lifted the violin to his shoulder and drew the bow across the strings, the noise of the city faded. His music spoke where words failed. Each note carried sorrow, survival, and hope. Sometimes children paused, staring in awe at the old man who made the violin sing, while mothers dropped coins into his box. Mang Ramon knew hunger, rejection, and loss, yet when he played, he felt alive again. The world had taken everything from him, but the music of his soul remained unbroken, whispering stories of resilience to anyone who cared to listen. On a humid afternoon in Quezon City, Mang Ramon set himself down under the shade of the MRT station bridge. The noise of traffic mixed with vendors calling out their sales, but his hands reached instinctively for the violin. Its strings were old and sometimes cracked, yet to him, it was alive. An extension of his soul. He placed the bow gently and began to play. At first, no one noticed, people were too busy rushing home from work or carrying groceries from the market. But slowly, a melody rose above the chaos, soft yet powerful, like a voice breaking through the crowd. His music painted pictures of pain, of the day he had seen fire and dust cover New York, and of the nights he had spent sleeping on empty streets after losing everything. Children were often the first to stop. Their innocent eyes were drawn to the sound, tugging at their parents' hands, asking them to listen. Mothers would sigh, then smile, dropping a few coins into his wooden box as they walked away. Some people shook their heads, dismissing him as just another homeless man with a pitiful story, but others felt a strange pull in their hearts. They could not explain why his music made their chests heavy, why it stirred emotions they had long buried. For Mang Ramon, every note was more than just music. It was his voice, his prayer, his testimony that he was still here. Though his stomach ached with hunger and his body grew weaker each day, he found strength in the violin. When the bow touched the strings, he was no longer invisible. He was not a forgotten man, he was a survivor, telling his story to anyone willing to pause, even for a moment, and listen. The evening air at Quezon Memorial Circle was warm and alive with chatter. Families gathered for the community charity event, food stalls lined the pathways, and children ran freely under the glow of the streetlights. Mang Ramon stood quietly at the edge of the small stage, clutching his violin to his chest. He had been invited by one of the organizers who often saw him play beneath the MRT station. At first, he felt nervous. He was just a street performer, a man people usually ignored. Standing before a microphone with hundreds of eyes on him seemed overwhelming, and for a brief moment, he thought of walking away. But then he remembered his father's voice and the promise he had made to himself long ago: as long as he could hold a violin, his story would live through music. When he raised the instrument to his shoulder and the bow touched the strings, the noise of the crowd melted into silence. The first note rang out, soft and trembling, like a whisper of grief. Then the melody grew stronger, pulling hearts with it. His music carried the weight of the past, the tragedy he had witnessed in New York, the despair of losing everything, and the loneliness of nights on the streets of Quezon City. Yet, hidden within the sorrow was hope, like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. Children who had been laughing moments before stood still, their eyes wide. Parents held their breath, some holding hands a little tighter. Strangers wiped away tears without knowing why. For 10 minutes, the entire park listened, captivated, as if the violin itself was speaking. When the final note faded, the silence was broken by thunderous applause. Mang Ramon bowed his head, overwhelmed. For the first time in decades, he was not invisible, he was heard. The video of Mang Ramon's performance traveled faster than anyone could have imagined. A young college student who had been at the Quezon Memorial Circle that night uploaded the clip to social media with the caption, "This homeless man's violin carries the soul of the Philippines." Within hours, the video was shared hundreds of times, and by morning it had reached thousands. The comments poured in, some expressing disbelief that such talent had been hidden on the streets, others confessing that his music brought them to tears. People wrote things like, "I don't know this man, but I feel his pain," and "This melody healed something in me." As the video crossed borders, international viewers joined in. Messages arrived from people in America, Japan, and Europe. Survivors of the 9/11 tragedy reached out, saying his music transported them back to that day but also gave them peace. The story of Mang Ramon was no longer just his own, it became a mirror of human resilience, a testament to how suffering can transform into beauty when expressed through art. News outlets began to pick it up, calling him the homeless violinist of Quezon City. Journalists visited the park and interviewed passers-by who remembered him. Suddenly, the man who had once been ignored on the streets was now the subject of nationwide attention. But beyond fame, what touched Mang Ramon most was seeing the faces of ordinary people listening to his music, not with pity but with respect. Crowds started to gather wherever he played, recording him, applauding, and sometimes even bringing food or small gifts. For years he had been treated as invisible, yet now, because of a single performance, the world had finally seen him. Not as a beggar, but as a survivor whose violin spoke louder than words ever could. 20 years after that tragic morning in New York, Mang Ramon's life had come full circle. For so long, he had lived in shadows, surviving each day with nothing but his violin. But after his story and performance went viral, people began to see him not as a broken man, but as a living symbol of strength and resilience. Charitable groups in Quezon City reached out to offer him shelter, food, and medical care. A local music foundation even offered to restore his old violin, but Mang Ramon refused to replace it completely. The scratches and worn edges were part of his history, part of the journey he carried with him. When he was invited to perform again at a larger stage, this time in front of thousands, he felt his knees tremble. But as the spotlight shone down, he remembered all the nights he had played under bridges, ignored by the world. Now, every ear was listening, every eye was on him. As his bow moved across the strings, the crowd rose to their feet. The music was not just about pain anymore, it was about survival, forgiveness, and the miracle of still being here. People wept openly, applauding not only his talent but the unshakable spirit behind it. International organizations invited him to perform abroad, calling him a voice of hope. Yet Mang Ramon remained humble, often returning to the streets to play for children, because to him, music was never about fame, it was about connection. From being a homeless survivor of 9/11 to becoming a beacon of inspiration in Quezon City, Mang Ramon proved that even when the world takes everything away, the heart still has the power to sing. His violin became more than an instrument, it became a reminder that the human spirit can never truly be silenced.